wondering what appropriate the right approach would be to teaching this age and supporting kids and figuring out their racial identities. And maybe I'll start with Sarah as well, because you were, the teacher in the classroom, and maybe Oni, we can talk about what the kids are saying after that.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is not shying away from talking about it. When I talk with educators, I do workshops with educators. It's most of the time who I'm talking to. They say things like, "I want to have these conversations," or "I believe that this matters," and I don't even know where to start. I didn't have practiced this myself in my home or in my classroom. There are so many people who share the same thing. It's like it's the same quote from MLK. I hope my children are not judged on the color of their skin, and kind of just stopping there and emphasizing that colorblind mentality. When, of course, as everyone has said already, of course, kids see color. Kids see human difference, right? And they're curious about it. That doesn't mean that they always are expressing it verbally. Sometimes they don't have the language to do that. So I think the biggest and most important thing that we can do is to model and practice using accurate language for human difference, because that sends the idea that difference is not, a good thing or a bad thing. Difference is just different. There is not always a value judgment associated with difference. Now, of course, societal structures and so on have created hierarchies and, put values on difference, but kind of fundamentally in a lesson we want our children to interpret is that they can get along with, see, make friends with kids who are different in so many different ways, and that's okay. And getting comfortable with some of the language for that really matters. I want to share a really quick anecdote, if that's okay, because as we were getting ready for tonight, I've been reflecting on a few experiences that I had as a classroom teacher, going from that first year of teaching and having students, saying, "What are you?" and not really knowing how to engage and feeling like that was a missed opportunity in retrospect, that I would kind of dance around the issue. I would use, I'd talk about, well, my family's from Malaysia, instead of saying, this is the racial identity that goes with it. This is the language that we use with it. And I don't think it was ever a satisfying answer for my students. They would keep asking, and yet I didn't know how to answer. To a few years later, I was now teaching on the Mississippi side of the river, in a small town in the rural Mississippi Delta, again, majority Black and African American school. And I was teaching third grade now, so my students were mostly 8, 9, some 10 years old. And one of the big field trips that we would do every year was Farm Safety Day. We're a rural community, you got to go to the civic center and learn farm safety, like how to put on your life vest and don't walk in front of the tractors and things like that. And the thing that has stuck with me is that the white private school from the same town also had their third grade class go to Farm Safety Day on the same day. So it was the first instance that I had seen my students interacting with the other third grade students who lived in their same community, but who they almost never interacted with on a day-to-day basis. Now, that year I had one white student in my class. The rest of my students were Black. And in the white school, in the third grade class, there was one Black student in their class, and the rest of the students were white. And watching these two groups kind of eyeing each other and not knowing what to do, and my students, like several of them, kind of tugged on my arm and said, "Is she okay? Like, do we need to get her?" That that really made me realize how racially conscious, of course, they are, even at this 8, 9, 10 years old. They already not only see it, they also have assumptions and ideas about how society is organized around it, who belongs where and why, who doesn't belong where and why. And it was really important to talk to other teachers in the school and make sure that we had a conversation with the class afterwards and not shying away from it, which is what I would have done when I first started out. And it wasn't perfect, right? But sometimes that's okay too. Saying, "You know what, kids, I didn't have much practice doing this when I was young, but we're going to work through that together." And I think that was so much more meaningful for them than the standard, like, kind of dancing around it, using the nice or the polite language that I had been raised to use when I was growing up myself.